This is the Decarbonization Disruptors Podcast. I am your host, Matthew Cohen. On this episode of our podcast, I am pleased to welcome Matt Stanberry, Vice President of Highland Electric Fleets. With over 600 electric school buses under subscription, Highland is a leader in electrifying student transportation by providing a turnkey solution that makes EV fleet adoption simple, reliable, and cost-effective. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Matthew, so thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I've been following Highland for a while now. It's been a company that's just been on my radar. I see a lot on social media and on LinkedIn, and I'm excited to learn more about what you're doing. I'm really excited to hear more about you as well, because I saw that you had your education bound in environmental science and policy, which kind of, looking at your career, kind of made your education sort of made you tailor-made for the career that you've chosen. So I was just kind of curious what motivated you to focus on sustainability and the environment as a career trajectory, as early as college.
Yeah, well, I was one of those funny kids who decided early on what I wanted to do. I actually could trace it back to elementary school, of all things, and a couple of different book reports that I was doing. I found myself just really drawn to air issues. And decided that it was really interesting to look at them from the standpoint, and this obviously evolved over time, but of solutions. And it felt to me that you should be able to use market-based solutions to solve these things. In fact, that was probably the only way to really go about them at scale. Here I am, however many years later, trying to do just that. And it's been a lot of fun to have a kind of mission-driven career to date, chasing that sort of original passion.
No, that's great. And I was curious too, because I saw that, majority of your career is focused a lot on policy, being at ICF, some of the places where, policy has been a large part of your career. I was just curious because I wonder if I asked this in the right way that makes sense, is there's kind of been this interplay between, policy initiatives driving sustainability, and then, like you talked about just now, market-based solutions and kind of letting the private market decide what technology is going to be adopted. And I'm wondering, kind of from your perspective, is that interplay still a back and forth? Is the market sort of deciding more now with kind of policy initiatives not being as prevalent? Do you think policy needs to be more on the forefront to drive innovation? Where's that go? But where's that back and forth at this point in the sustainability journey that we're on, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, right. There's a fundamental connection between policy and markets, right? If you sort of step back from a macro perspective, policy sets the framework for market performance, right? It's and how actors behave in those markets, right? It sets the rules and regulations fundamentally, and then policy can also serve as a catalyst for accelerating certain things that society wants, and basically bringing them to scale quicker, right? And then markets, of course, are the only real way to drive both the solutions on the ground, right? It's market actors that actually implement projects and put steel on the ground, if you will. And they're also the only way to scale, right? If you have successful market participants, they scale, and with them go the solutions. And so there's a fundamental linkage that's really inseparable between policy and markets, and I think we see that in school bus electrification, just as an example, where you've seen different policies look to serve as a catalyst, not a replacement, but just a catalyst to speed adoption, which helps industry skip steps and accelerate its own investment, and helps you come down the cost curve for a technology with any technology from, you know, the iPhone to tons of different energy technologies. You have a natural cost curve that a technology comes down as scale, adoption happens, then scale and that adoption happens. And the quicker that early stage of adoption happens, the faster you come down that scale, down that curve. So we see that in the electric school bus space today.
And I'd love to hear more about what you're doing at Highland now that pushes that adoption. Especially, I want to learn more about the general offering, but also kind of the uniqueness of your electrification as a service model, how you're leveraging that.
Yeah, I think to answer that question, the best thing to do is sort of step back to before Highland was in existence, and our basic observation why we set up the company. Right, the basic observation was that there were a lot of districts that were really interested in putting their kids on better buses, and there were electric school buses that served that need, and they came from major manufacturers. They worked pretty well if you knew what you were doing, but there were two things that were preventing them from really being adopted at scale. The first was that while they could save you money over time on operations, they cost more upfront at that point, and that upfront cost was a hurdle for schools. And then the second, more subtle one, but just as important, if not more so, is that it felt too complicated and risky for a transportation director in a school who's just focused on getting kids to school on time safely, full stop, to really think about making a full transition or even a significant transition, because they had to rely on that charging infrastructure to create the uptime for the buses to deliver on time. Right. And so what our observation was, that's not a tech problem, that's a business model and access problem. And if we set up a company that was really centered on having that expertise, we could probably really help on both fronts. And what we came to, and you really see this, is an electrification as a service model that's really designed to solve those two fundamental challenges that we had identified up front: affordability on one side and risk and complexity on the other side. And so embedded with that electrification as a service framework, we're taking on a bunch of activities to solve both. And I can go into those in a little bit more detail if that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Okay. So on the just taking risk and complexity first, basically what we're doing is taking on everything that's involved with electrifying and centering it in our work, and trying really not to disrupt what the district does normally to run their buses. So if we're doing our job successfully, they're doing what they normally do, but they're now doing it on an electric bus. And what that means is we're planning with them over time how they're going to electrify. They're planning how the depots are going to look with them. We're buying everything for them, so buses, chargers, software, everything. We're overseeing all the development work on site, getting all the charging infrastructure installed, and then we're staying with them. So it's a long-term public-private partnership model. And so our contracts are between 10 and 15 years. So it's a long-term project that really is designed to match the lifespan of a bus, and make sure that bus is working and performing the function successfully that the district wants it to, which of course is delivering kids on time. What we do when we stay with them is, one, we train the staff. So we train their drivers, we train their mechanics, first responders. We then manage the charging of the buses. over their life. We pay for all the electricity that the buses consume. And we pay for all the maintenance on buses, chargers, et cetera. And we wrap the whole thing in a performance assurance to give the district comfort that there is an entity that really cares how the project is performing and is willing to take the steps to make sure that it does perform. So that's on the risk and complexity side. Then on the affordability side, basically what we're doing is going out as a specialized entity and capturing a bunch of values that the electrics can provide and passing those values back to the district and by reducing the cost of the contract, right? So if you look at our contract at a macro level, it's relatively simple. It's a fixed price per bus per year, essentially for the life of the bus. It varies by state and locality exactly how long the contract can go, but roughly speaking. And what we're doing is finding ways to make it less expensive and then reducing that contract price. So, for example, we're a taxable entity. We can depreciate the units, take advantage of tax credits that are available, and just pass those through to the district by reducing the contract price by the same amount. We're one of the largest buyers in the country. We buy at scale. We can pass through the value of savings through that purchasing power by reducing that contract price. We know what the savings is going to be from fueling and from maintenance. And so we're actually able upfront to pass those values through to the district. So we start stacking. Those are just sort of simple examples. There are more there. We stack all those things up and pass those through to the district. And now what you're starting to do is get a district to a point where it can actually compete with the cost to own and operate new traditional vehicles, which are usually diesels.
Yeah, and with all of the benefits, what I was interested in understanding is, I mean, you picked an industry that, traditionally does not adopt technology very quickly, the public school space. And so with all the headwinds that you get in the public school setting, budgetary, political, bureaucratic, what has there been a common denominator of what Highland's doing to get over that initial hump of, listen, we got enough to deal with. We don't want to revolutionize, one of the biggest operating costs that we have, which are buses. What's been the thing that has gotten Highland over that hump from school districts that, just don't want to take that leap of faith?
Yeah, I mean, I think two things. One is the business model itself, and the contract is sort of designed to handle part of that challenge, which is, wow, this feels overwhelming. I need somebody who knows what they're doing, just does this, and is held responsible for doing it in their contract. And so we've seen districts start to respond to that model, and it takes time for districts to learn about a new model and work through it. But as you see the adoption happening, and you mentioned the number of buses, I can say now we're up over 700. So it's growing rapidly. That momentum builds on itself, right? Comfort comes with adoption from one's friends and neighbors and seeing the buses out on the road. And so we see that building on itself. And if you think about some of the traditional questions about electrification, which they do vary by segment of electrification, but there's some relatively universal ones. People will ask, like, what's cold weather performance like? Can we meet routes? We're operating in Vermont. We're operating for a tribal nation at the Canadian border in Minnesota. We've got multiple projects in Michigan, projects in Massachusetts. It's very cold places. And it turns out that if you plan for, which, of course, this is our job, is to plan for the operating environments that you're moving into, vehicles actually work well. The issues you run into is if you don't plan, right? And so now that folks are seeing successful operations in these colder weather environments, folks get more comfortable, and so you see more people coming to the table. And so I think it's both been the model itself solving some of these initial issues, and then actually that momentum building on itself, and folks, the word of mouth starting to move, and that comfort rising.
And going off that more broadly, I was wanting to get your take on sort of EV fleet adoption generally, because I feel like, and maybe you can shed more light on this, that the fleet side of EV adoption is becoming more prevalent. I mean, I live in a random suburb in Northeast Ohio, and I can't remember the last time I saw an Amazon truck that wasn't electric, right?
Yeah.
So is the fleet side becoming more cost effective? That's where it's going. And where do you see the biggest growth potential for EV fleet management in different industries other than, delivery or for school buses?
Yeah. So I think fleets you're starting to see the fleet electrification take off, and there's a reason for that. Fleets are inherently a pretty rational buyer, right? That responds to underlying economics, and particularly fleets that have really good route patterns, so you know what those routes are going to be. It's sort of, and they get comfortable about finding industry that has really good operating experience and knows how to do this, like ourselves. You put the combination together and say, we have a better solution here economically, so we're going to do that. We don't care necessarily what the color is, whether there's a moonroof, whether there's this, that, or the other, which in a personal vehicle, right? It's like we make all kinds of choices on our vehicles. Right. I look at my family's choices. I'm like, wow, there's some interesting decisions that are being made. And fleets are just a different kind of buyer, right? That can move to that technology where it makes economic sense faster. And so I think we see that bearing out, and we see that, to answer your second question there, we see movement in fleets, obviously in school bus, in last mile delivery. We're seeing some other kinds of medium and heavy duty transportation, drayage, as an example, moving around from ports, which are set routes that are often shorter routes that things are moving. You're seeing some ports and airport movement, and so a number of these sort of pockets popping up.
And given that you have been in the EV space for a while now, and your overall background, people like yourself, I'm always interested in asking kind of how we push back against generally the headwinds of the EV revolution. I mean, I always am wondering, is it simply like you talked earlier about a messaging issue where the people who are against sort of wide scale EV adoption louder than the ones that are? Is it that the technology to have mass adoption just isn't there yet, and so when it catches up, and people will adopt when they do? Or is it something that I'm not thinking of that is keeping us from getting to a scale where we can have mass adoption because it just, like you talked about, just makes economic sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there is a fundamental basic educational point. Yeah, and it's true whenever you've got technology adoption, replacement technology adoption that happens, right? There are these there are curves of adoption, right? You move from your early adopters, into your early mass adopters, into the mass adoption phase, so on and so forth. And whenever you're moving along that curve, you're overcoming sort of the natural market challenges. And so that, there are ones that are specific to electrification, but if you kind of step back, you say, well, that's actually kind of similar to this challenge for this other technology. It's a different specific set of issues, but it's the same kind of thing. Your consumers are asking a set of questions that are in part derived from their traditional experience. Well, this is different. Well, what about this? Like, can it handle these kind of situations? And I think you're kind of stepping back to that broader picture. It helps you see that there's sort of a normalcy to this process that we're all going through, and fundamental to it is education. So a lot of folks, when they think of electrification still today, think about the, kind of terrible cordless drill that we had in the late 1980s, and the trouble using it, right? And at least successfully. And of course, today's electrification technology looks nothing like that. It's like the fastest performance you could ever ask for is electric. But there's still a good chunk of the populace that doesn't know that. And so there's a fundamental educational issue that has to be overcome. The cold weather performance that I was noting before, it's the same thing, right? It's folks are naturally asking those questions because they know, okay, they've heard that there's a range reduction in cold weather. So does this work? Well, actually, yeah, you could predict exactly what that range reduction is. And if you plan appropriately around charging infrastructure, the kind of vehicle that you're getting, the battery style that you're getting, you can actually operate quite well in those environments. But folks don't know that until they see those stories come out and they see the data. And frankly, they get access to the information. And so I do think at the core of this, it's an educational process.
And on the technology side, as far as kind of in the near future, what technologies do you see on the horizon for EV charging management? Is AI becoming more prevalent in that? What's kind of the next horizon for EV management, especially on the fleet side, that you see upcoming that you'll eventually adopt?
Yeah, I think there's a technology that's really here today that is the one that I would point to naturally as what's coming, because the technology is well established. It's vehicle to grid technology that allows the batteries on the vehicles to backflow power to the grid, or frankly a local building at times of need, and serve a function, right? If you look at school buses, they sit for the vast majority of their life, and they have pretty big battery packs. And so we have buses operating in commercial vehicle to grid programs that utilities operate today. And the benefit, of course, is that the vehicles and their batteries can earn revenue from the utility for providing that service, and that can help you pay for your electrification project. Today, it's not available in a whole lot of places. That doesn't have anything to do with the technology, really. It has to do with market constructs needing to be created, right? So in these markets, it's really around utilities and grid operators and the regulators being comfortable that the technology works, which we can show it does, and then creating the market structures in terms of grid programs or utility programs to capture the value from the technology. And we're actually doing a lot of work with utilities around the country today to help generate the data to show the utilities and their regulators that they work, and then design programs to capture those values. And we just had announced a big grant from the Department of Energy to work with a big group of utilities to do this at some scale around the country, for the express purpose of helping these programs get created. Because ultimately, the use of these batteries to help support the grid is good for society, because it's solving a societal need. Those batteries are available. They're out in the community, helping provide kids a better way to school, but they can serve a dual function here. And that's more cost effective for society to have them provide that service.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we're seeing more, and I hope that it becomes a widely adopted technology for all EV management that we see out there. So, no, I mean, this has been fantastic. I mean, what you're doing is definitely mission driven. It's an area that I think is well primed for you know being able to adopt the type of technology that you bring. So, in closing, anything else you want to share about what's going on now or upcoming with Highland that our audience should know and get excited about?
I'd leave you with two things. I think we're growing in multiple ways, and so we're starting to see uh, uh, the opportunity to support some other markets. And I don't have anything I can disclose just yet, but I will simply say we should have some news in the coming year that should be interesting and exciting to share. And then the last thing I'd share is we just did a survey with U.S. parents, which was really interesting about electrifying school buses, and fully 65% of them want their kids to ride on electric school buses. And it's really interesting when you break down the data, just how widespread the interest is. Like 63% of parents believe their kids would simply be happier. 68% believe that their physical health would improve, and 70% believe that pediatric asthma and other respiratory illness would decline. So really interesting to see that in a generalized survey of U.S. parents, that there's a base knowledge that's there about the benefits, and that's what we're tapping into, is that local desire to see a better technology used.
Well, 65% is a great number, and I think if we can leverage that, I think there's going to be a lot of great opportunities. So, no, I mean that's great. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know our audience will be very keen on listening to understanding more about what you're doing, and it's great. Again, glad to have you. So, again, Matt Stanberry, thank you for taking the time to do this. This is the Decarbonization Disruptors Podcast, and we will see you next time.